Hi, I'm Dr. Sri Banerjee, core faculty for the College of Health Sciences and Public Policy at Walden University. And in this video, I'll be going over Sustainable Development Goal number 10. So, goal number 10 states reducing inequality within and among countries. And as you're paying attention to these SDGs, if you have seen my other videos, then you'll note that each one of these not only has a different icon so that you can immediately identify the corresponding sustainable development goal, but each one of these, if you notice, has unique colors. So kind of this bright pink color is characteristic of Sustainable Development Goal number 10. So what does it precisely mean to reduce inequalities? Again, a good starting point is how things were disrupted as a result of the pandemic. So if we think about the pandemic, it's likely to reverse progress made in reducing income inequality since the financial crisis. So financial crisis, again, 2007, 2008, this is something I talked about in other videos, but just a good way to understand the gravity of the situation is to see if it took place in the past. And so economic downturn, the most current one that we have to compare to is the economic downturn of 2007 and 2008. So this is kind of a seesaw that's been created looking at the estimated increase in the average Gini for emerging markets and developing countries. So there will be an increase of 6%. So this seesaw is actually here to illustrate the concept of the Gini coefficient, which is a very direct measure of income inequity. So looking at the highest earners and the lowest earners, what are the differences between the richest and the poorest? If those differences are significant, are big, then the Gini coefficient will also be a higher number. So what that means is that so this shows that higher inequalities persist as a result of the pandemic. So now let's look at some of the other statistics. The proportion of the global population who are refugees have more than doubled since 2010. And so the Russia-Ukraine war that is going on currently, that is contributing to people that are seeking refugee status or asylum status in different countries. So for every, it's important, every 100,000 persons, there are 311 refugees. So the remittance costs are at an all-time low at 6.5%. So further progress is needed to reach that 3% target. This is really tragic that in 2020 4,186 deaths occurred and disappearances occurred in migratory routes worldwide. So what happens when people want to take a chance and start fresh and with a new life in another country, they take risks which they otherwise wouldn't. So you see a lot of times in stories, and I believe there was the story of Elian Gonzalez, where there was some controversy over people that migrated, and so even when they do go through a lot of days, maybe in the sea, in ships that are not safe, even after that, they have to go through laws from the country to try to better address inequities. So what are some examples of inequality? This was something that I thought it was really interesting and important. So women and children with lack of access to healthcare die each day from preventable diseases such as measles and tuberculosis or in childbirth. So older persons, migrants, and refugees face lack of opportunities and discrimination, an issue that affects every country in the world. 1 in 5 persons, listen to this, 1 in 5 persons reported being discriminated on at least one ground of discrimination prohibited by international human rights law. So, and among those with disabilities, 3 in 10 personally experienced discrimination, with higher levels still among women with disabilities, including based on religion, ethnicity, and sex, pointing to the urgent need for measures to tackle multiple and intersecting, I'm going to say this again, intersecting forms of discrimination. So this is discrimination not just based on one characteristic or another. It's multifaceted, multiple areas that are sources of discrimination, which must stop, which is inequalities, which need to be addressed, and that is the main goal of this SDG. So this was another question and answer that I got related to Sustainable Development Goal, and that is, how do we tackle discrimination? So we talk about it, and so in today's world, we're all interconnected. Problems and challenges like poverty, climate change, migration, or economic crises are never just confined to one country or region. Even the richest countries still have communities living in abject poverty. The oldest democracies still wrestle with racism, homophobia, and transphobia, and religious intolerance. Global inequality affects us all, no matter who we are or where we're from. So this is really important. It's important to understand that we're all in this together. In any sort of segregation, and any sort of civil strife, and any sort of segregation based on race or gender or anything. All of these things affects all parts of society, and so we all need to bring our voices together and end discrimination once and for all. And that is the main goal that is the main aim for this goal. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, just like I do with the other Sustainable Development Goals, but I wanted to take a little bit of a different approach to be describing this. So in this segment of the video, what I'll go over is the specific sustainable, the specific SDG targets, and go over these in greater detail. So this is the UN Environment Program, UNEP.org, and this you can use to look at each of the targets. And then using these targets, you can kind of plan interventions. And this is how each one of these are set up, but just looking at this, this is looking at, starts off by talking about how climate change and natural disasters affect the most vulnerable and poorest populations. And so this exacerbates existing inequality. So when you have earthquakes and hurricanes, natural disasters, and I've actually talked about this separately in a lot of my mapping videos, but this disrupts daily living and puts a lot of people behind, and a lot of disruption. People move as a result of natural disasters. Human behavior changes when you have to respond to an emergency disaster, and so response is different. So the environment can contribute to the reduction of inequality as well. So if you have a ecosystem, and this is looking at some of the other SDGs as well, some of the targets that were formed through there, is that looking at institutional arrangements regarding the use and access to these natural resources. These institutional arrangements which make this possible is extremely important. So you can click on the full image here and take a look at what is part of this reduced inequality, and this goes into some investing in sound and fair management of natural resources. Exploitation of natural resources is a contributor to inequality. So if we can resolve some of this exploitation, illegal logging, and this is taking place in many parts of the world. Promoting institutional arrangements providing equal and fair access and the use of natural resources. Climate change and disasters have a dire impact on the poorest and vulnerable groups and contribute to exacerbated existing inequalities. And then natural disasters and environment. But just going back, so some of the targets which are important to achieve, and this is looking at each of the so the way this is arranged, just quickly, is that the on the left you have the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and then over here you have all of these listed, all 10 of these listed in a concept map arrangement, which makes it easier to interpret. I didn't set up the other talks in this way, but this one in particular I thought would be especially interesting if we talked about number one, sustaining income growth for lower incomes. How do you achieve this, or a little bit more on this? You can read, if you point the mouse here, then it says by 2030 progressively achieving and sustaining income growth of the bottom 40% of the population at a rate higher than the national average. So economic growth and sustained economic growth for bottom 40%. Remember, at the beginning of my lecture, I started off with that Gini coefficient and showed you that the balance between the rich and the poor. I showed that scale that was there. Well, this is allowing for that scale to be a little bit more balanced. Sustainable Development Goal number 2, promoting inclusion. So this is all about empowering and promoting social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, or economic or other status. Sustainable Development Goal number 3, the third target for Sustainable Development Goal number 10 is ensuring equal opportunity. So that's ensuring equal opportunity and reducing inequalities of outcome, including by eliminating discriminatory laws, policies, and practices, and promoting appropriate legislation, policies, and action in this regard. And so equal opportunity is very important, and goes back to the diversity, inclusivity principles. and inclusion. So adopting policies, especially fiscal, wage, and social protection policies, and progressively achieving greater equality. And then improving regulation, global financial markets. So not only monitoring global financial markets, but regulating them and their institutions, and strengthening the implementation of such regulations. So that's 5 of them. There's 2 more left. It's part of enhancing the voice for developing countries so that they have more of a role in decision making, and then facilitating safe migration and mobility of people. And I talked about refugee health a little bit earlier, so I'm not going to delve too much further into this, but including implementation and well-managed migration policies, because what ends up happening, like I said, I gave you multiple scenarios where people are a lot of times die in trying to make that passage between a poor country to give their life, give their families a better life in a more well-to-do country. So this is the Sustainable Development Goal on the left. This is the target. This is the indicator. So if you go into the UNEP.org website, then you'll be able to go into all of these. And I hope this has given you some of a little bit of a context to better understand Sustainable Development Goal number 10, about reducing inequalities, and more importantly, how this is very much connected to the work of social determinants of health, and this can really link very well into the realm of education and understanding how these apply well into education. Thank you for listening.